so I thought it was a good idea to kind of turn our basement into some money.
As Seattle grows in popularity, many homeowners are cashing in, listing their living spaces on sites like Airbnb. But the city says too many short-term rental units could make our affordable housing crisis even worse.
What we're looking for is policy that helps people stay in Seattle.
Does the drive to deliver more affordable units trample private property rights?
I don't understand why the city thinks that this is their housing.
And are new regulations needed?
I would like to see them all have the licenses that we have to have.
Our studio panel weighs in.
How do we protect the long-term rental housing that we have today?
We would be out of business. The good actors are pushed out of business.
The showdown between affordable housing and the home-sharing economy. Next on City Inside Out. Welcome to City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. The city of Seattle is trying to change the rules for short-term rentals from companies like Airbnb and VRBO. The mayor and city council say these services are growing so fast, they're threatening our supply of long-term affordable housing. But some short-term rental hosts say more regulation could hurt their ability to provide a much-needed service in our rapidly changing economy. It's a heated battle between two very different segments of our housing market that the city is trying to cool down. Amy Fay is polishing up her Upper Rainier Beach home with an eye on opportunity.
With the housing shortage, I thought it was a good idea to kind of turn our basement into some money.
She's trying to cut in on the growing trend of short-term rental housing. She and her husband are fixing up her 900-square-foot basement and listing it on Airbnb.
Opening possibilities up for us to then, rent this and have it as an income and travel or retire.
It's a goal many people are chasing in the new so-called sharing economy. City leaders estimate there are now more than 4,000 short-term rentals in Seattle.
That's where we have a problem in the housing market.
Howard Greenwich is a senior policy advisor for the nonprofit Puget Sound Sage, which advocates for affordable housing. His research shows 88% of Airbnb hosts in Seattle are like Amy.
It'll be cool.
Renting out a single unit in a home they live in. But nearly half of the increase in Airbnb rentals from last fall to this spring came from hosts who have 6 units or more on the market.
That is not someone running a small business on the side to cover their mortgage. We're talking commercial operations, and that's where the growth is.
The city is working to manage the explosion of short-term rentals through some newly proposed rules, where any property could be a short-term rental for up to 90 nights a year. If the rental location is the primary residence of the host, as in Amy's case, rentals would be allowed past the 90-night limit, but a new operator's license would be required. For locations not occupied by the host, units could not be rented past 90 nights. The city says these rules are needed in areas like South Seattle, where people are already getting priced out of their homes. Greenwich says that problem gets worse as affordable homes turn into short-term rentals.
We see that as having a potential effect on displacement, pushing out low-income households, our communities of color, immigrants and refugees that are already at risk of displacement.
I think that the traditional rental model is changing.
Dr. Eric Friedland built the Roy Street Commons on Capitol Hill 5 years ago, specifically for short-term renters like medical students, and he's a host on Airbnb.
Come on in.
The building has 39 furnished, small 121-square-foot rooms, each with a shower and toilet stall, on 4 floors with communal kitchens and laundry facilities.
We're going to go upstairs.
Friedland argues he's adding to the city's affordable housing stock with his micro apartments. He says Seattle should incentivize building affordable homes, not punish entrepreneurs like him.
I don't understand why the city thinks that this is their housing. If they want to provide affordable housing, then, partner with developers.
Friedland also does not live here, one of many new possible obligations from the city, which he says could tie up innovative businesses like his, with red tape that's expensive for everyone.
They're going to spend millions of dollars trying to regulate all of these, and I think they're going to have a lot of difficulty.
This is my lobby, and this is kind of my concierge center.
Daryl King owns the Bacon Mansion Bed and Breakfast on Capitol Hill. and says some short-term rental hosts are competing unfairly.
They're like furnished apartments that are owned by investors running essentially a hotel.
He doesn't list his B&B on a short-term rental site. And he says new platforms like Airbnb and VRBO are skirting the health and insurance laws he's required to adhere to.
It's for the guest safety is what a lot of these regulations are for that we follow. And we think they're important, and everyone should really be on that same level playing field.
We just have pledged to play our part in making sure our community pays its fair share.
Sin Wong is Airbnb's public policy manager, who says her company understands the concerns raised in Seattle.
We certainly believe that responsible hosting means not engaging in wide-scale commercial conversions of housing to short-term rentals.
Airbnb collects sales tax on its units and says it's helping local businesses thrive, making a $178 million yearly impact on Seattle's economy. And Airbnb says it wants to be a partner in the affordable housing solution, helping homeowners who might be in need.
We offer an opportunity for that single mom to become an entrepreneur, to use her biggest expense and turn it into an asset and help pay for some of the expenses that her family is facing.
Smart Growth Seattle Director Roger Valdez says the current proposal will pit short-term and long-term renters against each other. He doesn't oppose taxing Airbnb and VRBO hosts, but would rather see the city deregulate housing to encourage more affordable development.
Rather than spending our time enforcing something that limits choices and options, why not create more choices and more opportunity? That's a better use of city resources, we think.
What is the best use of city resources on this issue? They may be short-term rentals, but the answers are going to take a while to figure out.
It looks to be a solution looking for a problem.
So what we're looking for is policy that helps people stay in Seattle.
Joining us to discuss this issue further, we have with us Tim Burgess from the Seattle City Council. Tim, thanks for joining us. We also have with us Rebecca Saldana. She's the Executive Director of Puget Sound SAGE, an affordable housing advocacy group. Rebecca, good to see you again.
Thank you.
We also have with us Charlie Cuniff. He is a host on Airbnb. Charlie, good to see you.
Thank you.
And Michelle Aquavella. She runs properties for VRBO, Airbnb, advertises on other sites too. Thank you for being here, Michelle, as well.
Thank you.
I want to get started with an overview of what the city is working on here, what the city would like to do with short-term rentals. Councilmember Burgess, why do you think more regulation is needed with these types of units?
So really our primary purpose is to make sure that we protect as best we can the supply of long-term rental housing in our city, while at the same time, as we saw in the setup piece, allowing individuals to take advantage of the economic benefits that come to them by using these rental platforms. So we're trying to balance the economic entrepreneurial opportunity for Seattle homeowners to rent out their home or a room in their home, and at the same time protect long-term supply of housing in the city so that it's not converted to short-term rentals.
All right. Rebecca, I know Puget Sound SAGE has studied this issue quite a bit and has provided some information to the city as well. What has your research shown with regard to short-term rentals? What's your take on adding more regulation in the city?
Sure. I mean, I think what our research has shown is that since September, we've seen over 600, or every year over the last few years, 600 new rentals have been converted to short-term rental, and since September that growth has been at about 50%. And so our concern primarily is making sure that any policies and understanding the data is focused on making sure that there's no harm being done to communities at risk for displacement.
Okay. All right, fair enough. And I'm going to dive into that issue a bit with you further on here. But Charlie, let me jump in and talk about your background here. You own 2 houses. You host an Airbnb site in one of them in the Fremont neighborhood. What's your take on what the city is trying to do? How would this impact you potentially?
Well, you know, we bought our house many years ago, and then we moved to Columbia City to a smaller house so we could be closer to our grandkids. We utilized the house in Fremont as our living. This is how we support our family. It's how we support our retirement. We don't have pensions. This is how we support ourselves. I think that, as the setup says, if there's a problem with whole apartment, people going in, buying apartment buildings, nobody has a problem with regulating that. But I don't think that people who own one house or own a second house and they're renting that out to help support their family are part of the problem here. I really would like to see what the numbers are as in that regard. And if you have this kind of, if we take out the whole apartment building approach, if we take those out of the picture, how many other units are actually going to go onto the market at an affordable rate? You know, and what really, I don't think it's going to be that much. Okay. And we support housing. We want more housing. We want more housing for more people of all types. And we think that working with us, I think that the city can utilize the Airbnb homeowners as a resource to help us actually get more money to build more housing.
Okay, so that owner-occupied piece is part of this, and the numbers too. We're going to dive into that as well. Thank you, Charlie. Michelle, let me bring you in here. You've been doing vacation rentals for more than a decade in the Seattle area. You manage 46 properties. As a matter of background, I wanted to point out the city actually shut down some of your places in 2007, saying they were commercial rentals in a residential zone. You fought back. A judge reversed that move and said you were operating legally. Important to point that out. But now we're talking about some new rules, potentially. How would they affect you?
They would effectively put my business out of business. Our 76% of our homeowners these are their second homes, they're not their primary residences. And they use the properties themselves. They have a need to be here for various reasons. And with the 90-day cap, my business wouldn't make enough money to stay in business. They may still choose to rent for those 90 days, and the rest of the time it would sit vacant. It just doesn't make financial sense to do that. And what we're gonna, I did a quick poll of my owners who are second homeowners, and they said, yeah, we need the flexibility to use it. So when we're not there, it's gonna sit vacant. So you're gonna have vacant homes that aren't being utilized, that may fall into disrepair because they no longer have the income from the properties to keep them maintained. And what you'll see in the inventory of vacation / short-term rental versus long-term rental is that our homes are in pristine condition. They are kept in just perfect condition, unlike many long-term rentals. So ours are actually a value benefit to the neighbors.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. Tim, I want to bring up a point that both of these guests were making here with regard to the balance you're trying to strike on this issue. No question we have an affordable housing crisis. A lot of people are in need in our city, but I think some short-term rental hosts, like Charlie, are saying we're trying to pay the mortgage with this, help the local economy. Why target this industry, especially people who are trying to make some money off a second home?
So good observations. I think it's really important. Our analysis shows that somewhere between 80 and 85% of individuals who are using these online platforms will not be affected at all by these regulations. So we're talking about, 15, 20% of those who are doing this who are really engaging in a commercial enterprise. And they are converting long-term rental housing in the city to short-term rental. And if we're going to use the city's regulatory authority, I think we should be siding with residents finding long-term housing as opposed to visitors to our city. So it's how do we balance this? How do we get this right? We have not yet introduced legislation. We've opened a public comment period that'll last over a month, so we can work through these issues and come up with a solution that really is focused on preserving long-term rental housing in our city.
And Charlie, I know you raised your hand here, and maybe I can help with the question here. Is it this issue of penalizing people with second homes, or what's your thought here?
Well, if 85% of the people are not going to be affected, that means that 15% could be affected. And what are those numbers? And then all those 15%, they're not going to change over. So if half of those 15% change over, 7.5%, how many units are those, and what effect will that have on the market? And why, like individuals, we're not big investors. We own one property that we're renting out. We're not big time investors. We're not big time landlords. It's simply to help our family.
Okay.
So
Tim, quickly,
For example, in San Francisco, there are some reports that is as high as 25% of their available rental housing market has now been converted to short-term rentals. We clearly do not want to see that happen in Seattle, so we're attempting to lay the groundwork so that we can prevent that from happening. I brought a photograph here. This is one multifamily building in Seattle's First Hill neighborhood. These are all of the lock boxes of units in that building that have been converted to short-term rentals. And this is happening in many areas of our city. And I think that that is something we want to be very cautious about.
Okay.
And again,
Okay.
we have no problem with that. We have no
Right.
problem with those people, with that type of thing. I wonder if you can be Solomonic, as it were. I mean, can you be the Solomon and figure out, what works and what doesn't work?
I think there's going to be some wheeling and dealing here. Michelle, briefly, and then I do want to go to
Yeah,
to
so I
Rebecca.
have 13 years of experience in this industry in
Yep.
this city. So I've been the pioneer. I was the second listing on vrbo.com. And I have seen supply in the last 2 years skyrocket. And you hear Airbnb mentioned on TV shows, and they've got billboards. And so it's this hot, new, trendy thing, and people are trying it out, and it's cool and neat. And people like Charlie will realize how much work it is and decide it's not worth it. We used to be able to walk in and say, you're going to make this much as a vacation rental, this much as an unfurnished rental. Now it's almost exactly the same. It is hard for us to sell to people unless they have reason to use the homes themselves.
Okay. And Rebecca, I want to bring you in and talk about the research that Sage has done. And maybe we can try to answer Charlie's question here about how many units would actually come back on the market. I've heard some estimates that say maybe 300. What do we have here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, right now, I mean, that's what we're looking at. I think for us, it's moving forward,
Okay.
looking at the trends moving forward. So,
Right. But
there's
is 300 enough? It feels like a drop in the
well,
bucket.
in less than a couple of years, could equal 2,000 additional units
Okay.
if it's at the same rate. I mean, which you're saying the trends are, right? And we don't know if the trends will continue at this rate, but even if it's halved, that's still looking at almost 1,500 units
Okay.
that could be long-term rental. And so I think, again, to the point that Charlie made, I think for me, the problem is much more systemic than just housing, right? I mean, that's why at Sage we work really comprehensively at looking at labor standards, housing affordability, public transit, all these things add up, because it's a problem that we live in an economy in a region where someone that's worked his whole life doesn't have a pension or retirement. That's the problem. The fact that we have more and more people living from paycheck to paycheck that don't have any kind of safety net, and having this be the solution is the issue.
Fair
So
enough.
we need to make sure that we're building affordability and helping.
So,
Please, yeah.
Sea to Sky employs, we have 15 people that we employ, and
Right.
we manage 45 units. So that's 3 employees for every, or 1 employee for every 3 units. If you extrapolate that, if you're talking about 300 properties that you'd be taking off the market, that's 100 jobs. That's 100 people who right now are within that window of the $15 hour minimum wage. That you got, the city council just created that, and they'd be taking those jobs away.
I want to push back a little bit with you, Michelle, because I
Sure.
think there's a larger issue here trying to separate good actors from bad actors. And
Yeah.
I think we're trying to get to the root of that here. There was a recent study by American University that showed a lot of people working in the sharing economy either are avoiding paying taxes or are confused about how they should. And to be clear, I'm not putting you in that category at all, but do you think more regulation in the sector of the economy could help weed out some of these bad actors?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think smart regulation makes a lot of sense. I'm not against regulations at all. I actually think it's really smart for the city to know
Okay.
who the players are. Are they properly licensed, insured, and are they paying taxes?
Yeah.
What I worry about is that under the proposed regulations as they're written right now,
Yeah.
they would put legitimate people, because we only operate above board, we would never
Sure.
not. So we would be out of business. The good actors are pushed out of business, and what's remaining are you're pushing the industry underground. You're still going to have one of the issues, or one of the points I wanted to make, is in the accessory dwelling units and the backyard cottages,
Right.
or the single bedrooms. Those are very small spaces. Our most popular rentals are the 2 and 3 bedrooms that can sleep 6. And those are the people who'd have to rent 3 hotel rooms downtown, so we become a really affordable option.
Right.
Those are the ones that are going to be pushed underground. You're still going to see 2 and 3 bedroom properties. They're just not going to be legal.
I think one
Please,
of the dangers of discussing this issue anecdotally
Yeah.
is that we miss the bigger public policy objective
Okay.
that we're trying to achieve. And I think it's important to come back to that regularly. We have somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 units in the city of Seattle that are being offered on these various rental platforms. Airbnb is very supportive of our proposal with 2 exceptions. One, the 90-day cap, and some privacy issues that we're talking to them about, and I think we're going to resolve those. So it's not that we're trying to drive anybody out of business, but we want to make certain that we are protecting long-term rental properties in our city. And what we're seeing is dozens, if not hundreds of those are being converted to short-term rentals, which means that Seattle residents cannot live in those units. Okay. And that's the tension and that's the balance that we're trying to achieve here.
Charlie, let me bring in here. Would you consider turning your Airbnb site into a regular old long-term rental place? What do you think?
It doesn't exactly work for our family.
Okay.
You know, like I said, we lived in the North End. I lived in the North End for 33 years.
Yeah.
And that, I have lots of friends up there. We still use the house. We use it to host events with our friends. My family, I have 8 brothers and sisters. Yeah. You know, they come and they visit. That's where they stay. Yeah. It gives us the flexibility to use it, and we pay the taxes. We think that we are pro affordable housing. I've been on the housing. You know, we want to build more affordable housing. If we get affordable housing coming out of these larger developments, I think that might work. I think tax us. We'd love to help support more affordable housing. If we could put a 5% tax on these short-term rentals, we could raise $3 million a year. That'll produce 200 to 300 low-income housing units every year. We can probably meet 10% of the need for HALA.
Yeah.
With a tax.
I'm going to put that on the back burner for a second because there's an important taxing issue that goes with that. But Rebecca, I want to bring you in here because I think that there's a basic issue here, and Charlie brought it up, this whole idea of this is my private property, I'm engaged in a legal business, why does the city get to dictate what I do? It just seems like a clash potentially here between affordable housing and allowing people what they want to do with their homes.
Yeah, and I think one piece I do want to add in terms of a little bit of the data is just that about half are from families that own 1 unit, so similar to your case. Mm-hmm. But then there's over 42% of the growth comes from just 44 owners. Right. You know, and so I think that for us, I mean, that's particularly the issue because we see that basically they're running de facto hotels in housing that could be for residents and people that will live close by.
We have no problem with that.
Tim, I want to bring you in here and talk about, 2 things if I could. Let's talk about that why don't you just build more argument. And I've heard that a few different times. Rather than de-incentivize people who are trying to innovate here with Airbnb and other platforms, why not incentivize builders to build more affordable housing?
Well, and we do that, and the city does that, and we do need to build more supply. I think no one would disagree with that. Again, the issue here is how do we protect the long-term rental housing that we have today? I know there's a case out in Columbia City, not far from where Charlie lives, where an individual purchased an apartment building. Because it's in a neighborhood commercial area, they were able to come to the city, get a change of use permit, and they turned it into basically a hotel for long-term stays, and it's beautifully done. Right. We have no problem with that. And we still have to comply with our zoning and land use laws. And what we have now is residential units, multifamily residential units that are being essentially converted to hotels, like that photo I showed you. That's not in the long-term best interests of the city.
There's a tax piece too. I know Charlie said, hey, tax us and let's put it towards affordable housing. There's some state issues there. Okay.
That's a good idea. Yeah. We don't think we have that authority under current state law. Okay.
Do you go fight for it in Olympia?
We would have to go to Olympia and fight for that.
Okay. All right. 1, 2. Michelle, we haven't heard from in a little bit. You jump in, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I keep hearing that it's commercial use, but actually Washington State Supreme Court as well as King County Superior Court has asserted it as residential use. So I just want to clarify that point.
Good point. Charlie, what did you want to say?
I understand that we don't have the authority to tax Airbnb. And oftentimes the examples of New York and Philadelphia, other places come up, they're all underground now. They advertise on Craigslist instead, and they're not regulated. But my hometown is Jersey City, and Jersey City has a 39-year-old mayor and a 37-year-old council member that represents downtown. Yeah. They realize that this is part of the future, that they can't put the genie back in the bottle, so let's embrace it and tax it. Yeah. They have a 6% tax and they get $600,000 a year from it. I know it's difficult. I know that we would have to negotiate with King County, but I will help as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, I'm from Glen Ridge, New Jersey. I usually have to apologize for that.
Don't apologize. I love Glen Ridge.
It's a great place. Michelle, I wanted to talk about this issue potentially from the city to ask for data, including addresses of your locations, the number of nights, etc. I know hosts in other cities have raised concerns about that. Let's bring that up. What are your thoughts on that?
I know the Airbnb has an issue with that, and I'm sure that VRBO and HomeAway have an issue with that too, as they are just a listing platform. As a professional property manager, I don't have any problem with that. Like I said, I think it's the city should know who's operating a short-term rental, so they can keep tabs on it just the same way they do long-term rentals.
Got it. And Charlie, let me ask you the question. I know some B&B operators have said you should be running your operation more like they do, with quiet hours and things of this nature. Do you think that your industry needs to be regulated more like B&Bs or hotels to try to avoid the loud parties and stuff we've heard about in some of these Belltown units, etc.? What do you think?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And we have no problem with that. We've been running it for 3 years. We have not had a single solitary complaint from any of our neighbors.
Okay.
We have quiet hours. It's just like, let's work with the good operators and try to weed out the bad operators. And try to monetize it.
Yeah.
Monetize this as a resource.
Okay.
And this is a civic resource that we can monetize in order to create more affordable housing. I think it could all work.
Fair enough. I think we've been making some good progress here. We do need to wrap up the show, unfortunately. I'm going to jump down the line. Rebecca, start with you, and then I'll come back this way. I just want to talk about the fact that there is a public hearing ahead for this. It's on June 15th. If you want to check it out, right here at City Hall at 9:30 in the morning. The city working on crafting some of this legislation over the summer. What do you want to see come out of this process?
Yeah, I want to make sure that we're putting a policy together that is actually going to preserve affordability for rentals, because what we have seen in other cities is that whole apartments have been evicted and pushed out, and that often the cost of being poor is really high, and people don't really take into the factor of displacement when their children have to move, or when someone's running a child care center and they're pushed out. That has a huge impact on our community, and that's what we want to see in a policy moving forward.
Fair enough. Michelle, your thoughts moving forward with this issue, suggestions for the city?
Yeah, like I said, I'm all for regulating. I just think they need to be fair, equitable, and not target second homeowners and not target small businesses. It's not just me. There's other property managers, there's housekeeping companies. Like, there's a lot of people who are going to be put out of work, and it seems like you're targeting these $15 hour minimum wage jobs. Those people won't be able to pay for rent. So what are we doing here? What's the cost-benefit analysis? I don't think it makes sense the way it's written right now.
Okay, Charlie, your final thoughts here.
I appreciate what you're trying to do, and I'm all for more housing. I think that we can work together to generate more housing and allow the Airbnb economy to continue while we try to get the bad actors out of it.
Okay, Tim, you've heard a lot of different things today. I know you're going to hear a lot more on June 15th. Your thoughts? You're trying to find a win-win solution if possible.
Sure. We're in the kind of the public comment period now that will last until early July.
Yeah.
And then we'll craft and introduce legislation. So now's the time to share opinions and perspective and help inform us so we make good decisions.
Okay. Thank you very much, all of you, for your input here, and we will be right back.
They're making money off it, so why wouldn't they get taxed?
Well, they're already paying into the system, so why tax them on top of that?
If anybody wants to stay longer than 3 months, then maybe they should consider permanent residence, right?
We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on Facebook and Twitter and give us your feedback. Before we close today, it's time for our weekly CIO poll. Should the City of Seattle regulate Airbnb and other short-term rentals? Yes, no, or are you unsure? We want to know what you think. Cast your vote and send us your comments at our website, seattlechannel.org/cityinsideout. While you're there, you can watch our programs online anytime. Well, we've come to the end of our production season, and we'll be taking a summer break. Check back this fall for more coverage of Seattle's top issues on City Inside Out. Thanks for watching.